Welcome to my podcast today. So today we are with Janie Frampton OBE DL, who's joined me in the studio. Today is very much about her career, her life, and the changes that she's made in the space of EDI. Welcome, Janie.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm very, very excited to be having you in the studio, to be able to go through where we are right now. In terms of women in sports, it's been quite controversial in the last few years. And more recently, we've had obviously the Lionesses win the Euro. So I think that's put a mark in the sand in terms of where we are. But you've been here far longer than they have. And I'm sure you've got some stories to tell us. So in terms of yourself, Janie, can you give us a bit of an overview of how you grew up, how you ended up going into sports and why?
Yeah, so I guess I was always sporty. Okay. Whatever sport there was around playing, whether it was winter, summer alike, I would be involved without a doubt. And we'll talk a little bit more about football and my introduction when I found football at 15. Okay. But I always grew up running around, jumping, doing everything. You know, I was one of 7 children. And for me, it was all about playing outside, whether I was swimming, school holidays was always swimming or running around or cycling. Everything for me was about activity outside.
Where did that energy come from?
I have no idea. No idea. Maybe they'd call me ADHD now. I don't know. But I had so much energy and loved every minute of it.
Were your siblings very much like that?
Most of them were couch potatoes. So I now have a brother who has always been an elite marathon runner.
Okay, sounds like it's in the family.
2 hours 30 was his fastest time, which is very elite. And he's an elite veteran now. Yeah. Still runs every day of his life. I have a sister that took up marathon running late in life.
This makes me sound very lazy now.
Well, they just did, I guess. Maybe they found the benefits of running. And it's not just the physical benefits, it's the mental, psychological benefits that running gives you. But really, when we were young, none of them much were involved in sport apart from one brother.
And well, you mentioned obviously at the age of 15, that was a pivotal point for you. How did you come to that point in terms of deciding to go into football specifically?
I don't think I decided. I think it decided.
Okay.
So there was a girl called Anne Cooper who was a couple of years older than me. And she asked if I would be a part of a 5-a-side football team that was being played as part of our carnival week in our town. I said, of course, it's sport. Why wouldn't I? So we played in this 5-a-side competition for women. Everybody took the mickey out of it because they didn't think it was for girls. But we won it. And that point at 15, I fell in love with football.
Was there anything specific about football as opposed to other sports?
I think I'm very competitive anyway.
Okay, that's a space to be competitive.
Absolutely, and football's always been very competitive. And at the time, I didn't realise it, but I think I've got it now, that I was happy to do something that wasn't the norm. Okay. I didn't think that at the time, but I think I get it now, that I'm not really a mainstream person.
Yeah. Okay, so at the age of 15, deciding to go down that path, at what point did you decide not to actually go into the field in terms of a player and actually go into refereeing?
Well, it decided it for me because there were so few playing opportunities. You know, don't forget the brief history of women's football. In 1921, the FA banned women from playing football. Yeah. It wasn't ladylike. They were showing too much flesh, even though they were attracting crowds of over 50,000. Yeah. The FA banned this in 1921.
Why do you think that was the case?
Really? Well, it was quite simple. The long story short was the men went away to the First World War, the 1418 war, and the women then had to work in the munitions factories, particularly in the northwest. And part of that whole community working in the munitions factories, they started a football league. And Dick Kerr ladies were the most famous of the football sides. So they carried on playing, but of course the men came back from war and took their jobs back in the munitions factories, which was right at the time, but they also took football back. So it was deemed then that it wasn't a suitable game for women. But that ban stayed in place for more than 50 years.
Was it decided by men?
Well, of course. Football was created by men for men. you know, and we were interlopers without a doubt, and have been for many, many years since. In 1974, a group of volunteer women created the Women's Football Association. And it wasn't until 1994 that the FA recognised this and took over women's football. So that is very recent in our history.
Yeah. So as you went into football, what kind of experience did you have going professional in terms of officiating sports? Because what you've given here is a viewpoint that it's run by men, for men, with a lot of men around, and here you are as a second woman referee going into professional sports. What was that world like when you first went in?
Yeah, it was male, you know. So because there were very few playing opportunities for women when I was younger, and then in my early 20s I had my children.
Yes.
So that stopped me for a few years. And then when I wanted to come back to football when my children were 6 and 3, because my son was getting involved in football in a friendly way at 6, but there was no playing opportunities for me unless I went all day on a Sunday to play regional football because there were no county leagues. Dorset actually became the first county to have a county league, and that's because I was their county coaching rep. But hey, that's another story. So by default, I then qualified to be a referee because it was the only way I could be involved on that green bit.
That's actually quite sad to hear. Obviously, you've excelled afterwards, but to feel that's the only way you could actually get out there. That to think, now seeing what's happened in terms of your contribution and the contributions from others, clearly progression has been made, but to feel that that's the only way you could actually get on the pitch. What was that experience getting on the pitch like?
Tough. It was really tough. You know, I can remember my first game and the appointments officer said, "Oh, I'll break you in gently, Janie."
Okay.
Bearing in mind that most men wanted to see me fail at the time. So he gave me a local derby.
Okay.
With a company called Seismograph, who were drilling for oil down in Studland, with Swanage, which is the next town across. So I thought, break me in gently, you're joking. You know, and I'm stood there blowing my whistle for the first time, calling the captains together, thinking, oh my goodness, what am I doing here?
Talk about the deep end.
It was totally the deep end, but I got through it and I reflected on it. But my journey continued to be really tough.
Why do you think you got thrown in the deep end? Was it just a coincidence?
No, they wanted me to fail. That was really clear. Because the amount of barriers, naively, I didn't see this at the time. But the amount of barriers that were put in my way thereafter. You know, the first season, for example, I met all the criteria for promotion. I'd got a higher than average assessor mark, higher than average club mark, and they decided they weren't going to promote me.
What was the reason behind that?
No reason. They told me they don't have to give me a reason.
Okay.
And so I saw men that had lower merit table marks than me being promoted above me.
Yeah.
So that's when my determination started, that I'm thinking, no, this is not right, it's not fair.
Can we start dating this? So what year or what are we talking
1991-92 season.
Okay. So we're talking about 30 years ago.
Sure,
Okay.
yeah. And they put every barrier in place they could to stop me from being promoted. And I thought, if I just had 2 promotions, I'd be at the top of my county then, and people would take me seriously. That's all I wanted at the time.
Yeah.
But the one thing that's really important to remember through these journeys, and it's easy to reflect, is your goals change. They have to evolve. I just wanted to get 2 promotions so I'd be taken seriously.
Yeah.
But once I got those and I started then operating on men's semi-pro football, then the doors opened.
So what doors opened when you did go into that?
Internationally. So once I'd become what we call a level 4, which was the lowest level of men's semi-pro football, then I was then asked to go on as assistant referee internationally. Wendy Toms was the first woman. She was also the first woman on FIFA from England. And her and I used to then go on internationals together.
Okay.
So, that was where it really sort of opened up for me.
How was going international different to where you started? Was it a good experience? Was it intense?
It was brilliant because, you know, back then you had 2 FIFA lists. One was for women and one was for men. And men operated on men's and women's football, but women could only operate on women's football.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of that. So we could only operate on women's football internationally.
Just, yeah, shocking.
Even though we'd been promoted domestically on men's football, because we couldn't be promoted on women's football domestically.
Is that because of the cultural nuance underneath that, or is it just prejudice against women?
I think there was a few aspects, really. We were told really clearly that domestically you had to have a full pyramid of women's football from grassroots, so county level leagues, and then up through regional combination. And then we had the Premier League North and South, and then the Premier League proper. And of course, now we have WSL. Yeah. But they said they had to have a full pyramid of women's football before they could promote us on women's football. So when I was at the FA working, I created a pyramid for women's football. And I mean, eventually the FA referees committee agreed with it and said it could be promoted through counties, but counties couldn't be bothered, so they didn't promote it.
Okay. So really that was another hurdle for someone trying to get up, if they
Absolutely.
can't promote it lower down, to be able to get up there.
And some women don't want to come into referee men's football.
Why do you think that is?
Well, there's a whole different atmosphere about the men's and women's games. The women's game is a lot of fun. I used to find it my passion, and men's football was my challenge. So I think between the two different games, that made me the rounded referee that I became. But the women's football, if they lost 10-0, they'd still go out and celebrate and drink the bar dry. Men's football, they would go home all grumpy because they'd lost. Yeah, so I used to always feel we had almost like a rugby mentality, that we'd celebrate regardless of the outcome of the game. But that was very different.
I'm from Wales, so rugby's huge in Wales and Cardiff, and whether you win or lose, you still celebrate, you still have a good time, it's a family atmosphere. But when I grew up in Cardiff, you also saw when it was a football game, and you'd see the tension, the anger, if anything was literally on the streets, if a game was lost. And whereas if a game was lost for rugby, you'd still be like, we still celebrate all together, we're still here, we did really well still. But so I could sort of resonate from seeing the backlash growing up just on the streets of how things were. So you decided men's football would be more of a preference, your challenge to go into.
I loved both.
You loved both?
I loved both, without a doubt. I used to love, women's football was my passion. Yeah. I took my UEFA coaching badges so that I could coach football. I coached in the States. I coached the county squad for women. But men's football was the challenge. That's what that gave me the resilience. It made me robust.
Could you talk me through some of the challenges that you faced going into that? It seems like there's quite a few.
Yeah, we don't have that much time. But let's look at, firstly, changing facilities. So I would get the very best boiler cupboard or boot room or broom cupboard. I would get any room that was available to change in that wasn't appropriate. Yeah. And that was one of the problems. I'd go to some clubs where they only had one toilet in the whole of the changing area, and it sometimes didn't have even a cubicle. It just had a urinal. Okay. I know you're cringing, but this is the realistic side. Yeah. That with all due respect, it's not easy for a girl to go to the toilet in a urinal.
No.
But these are the things that we had. We had the prejudice. I remember turning up at one quite high profile men's semi-pro game, and I had my two assistants with me. We were doing the pre-match inspection of the field, and the secretary looked at the two lads and they said, which one of you is the referee? And I said, actually I am. And he just looked at me, looked back to the two men and said, so do you mind if we do X? And I said, no, that question is for me. Yeah. But they still disrespect you. And he looked at me before the match and said, I don't know why they put a woman on such an important game. And I thought, soak it up, Janie. Don't respond.
I guess.
But afterwards, he came into the boardroom and he said, I am so sorry. He said, I now see why they appointed you to the game.
Did it take a lot of time to get that turning point, that in terms of changing other people's mindsets, those kind of apologies coming in, or is it something that naturally just progressed once they saw your contribution?
Yeah, I always maintain that, don't tell them, show them. Yeah. Show them what I can do. Yeah. And that's where you get the respect then from the players. But, it even took the years when we did, Wendy, myself and Amy, we did the first men's professional game ever officiated by 3 women. Ever in the world.
I've seen that photo, by the way.
Yeah.
The iconic photo.
Did not have great legs though. Come on.
I thought you were in your zone.
Yeah. And there was like a local radio had run a competition for the best chant for the game. So you can imagine it was around parts of my anatomy that they wanted us to get that for the boys.
Yeah.
And when you've got a whole stadium chanting that, it's intimidating.
And very offensive and disrespectful.
Absolutely. They were waiting for us to fail.
So you clearly didn't fail. What made you keep persevering through that whole process? Because I can imagine going into men's urinals, having the broom cupboard, having chanting that's clearly offensive, not to your skill set. I'm not saying actually you're not good at what you do, because we've seen that, but actually something very personal. How did you overcome that to sort of move the dial in terms of persevering? Was it something that just within you that kept you going, or was it something that changed within the industry, or did you change the industry?
It's a really good question, because I believe I was naive when I came into football. I never saw any of this coming, but every barrier that I had to get over, I really learnt from. And there was almost a light bulb moment that said, no, I'm not having this. This is not fair. And my whole adult life has been lived on fairness. And I was stubborn, and I was competitive, and I loved what I did. So why should I give it up? Because men didn't feel it was right for women. And a lot of that, can I say, a lot of that was off-field people. Very rarely did I have a problem with the male players on the field.
What kind of things did you experience off the field?
So again, a lot of gender discrimination. People saying what they would like me to do with my flag, which is not physically possible. And things like that they were laughing, thinking they were so funny saying it.
I think it says a lot more about them than it is about you.
Yeah. And there was a senior council member in the FA who thought it was funny to call me the old bag and make the tea in front of the whole meeting, which were men.
But in that situation, how did the men respond? Because obviously they're bystanders watching this.
Sadly, they shifted in their seats, and you could see they were uncomfortable. No, but not one of them stood up. Not one of them said to this individual, stepped over the line. And when he did it again 20 minutes later, I had to call him out. And that was uncomfortable for me. It was uncomfortable for everybody in the room. But can you imagine if I didn't call it out?
When you called it out, what happened?
Well, he's never forgiven me. And he started calling me the OB from then onwards, because he thought that was funny too.
Yeah. But you could add an E on that now.
That's very true, actually. That's a really good one. But I remember saying to him, the first time you might have thought that was funny, but the second time you're out of order. And he sort of ha 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 ha. And you could see everybody else was uncomfortable. But again, why doesn't anybody call it out or support me?
Why do you think that was the case, that people saw it but didn't call it out?
Because he's very powerful. He was I'd love to name him, David Ellery.
Okay.
He was the chairman of the FA Referees Committee. Very powerful. He ruined a lot of referees' careers. Because he had favourites, and if you weren't a favourite, then he would set out to destroy you. And this is not off the record, because people knew this in refereeing. And he was determined that once I had called him out and embarrassed him, he made my life a misery.
Did he make your life a misery?
Oh, he did. Yeah, from then onwards.
In terms of the FA, was he a individual that's obviously doing this kind of behaviour, or was there other things going on within the FA? Because there's stories out there in terms of things that have happened untowards to men and women within the FA. What I'd like to identify is this part of a culture within that, or has it been a culture previously within that arena, or is it just single individuals orchestrating certain things coming out of it?
I think there's a couple of things there.
Yeah.
There was obviously single individuals.
Yes.
But there was also a culture where, I was one of 6 senior managers in the FA out of a staff of 588 at the time. And that is because I saw constantly men being promoted over women when they weren't the best person for the job. And that's not fair. We come back to this word every time. It was a culture, without a doubt. We have a fantastic chair in place now, Debbie Hewitt, the first woman chair, and she is doing a great job. But it's like she's trying to sort of shift something that has been so embedded historically within the organisation. It's difficult to do. And even now, I still battle on behalf of some of the women officials because things are happening that are not fair and they don't get it.
So in terms of FA, when we start talking about fairness, we go to the idea of ED&I, obviously equity, diversity and inclusion. And when we look at the idea of equality and equity, how is this manifesting within FIFA and in football overall from your perspective?
FIFA are probably a long way ahead of the FA, in fairness. So I became a FIFA instructor, one of 8 women in the world, in 2005. And I saw such a difference there. It almost made me unsettled in my job at the FA because I saw how it should be. You know, we had them.
How different is it?
Hugely different. So if you look at, and I'm going to name some amazing women. You know, Sonia Denoncourt, French Canadian, was head of women referee development at FIFA. She was a pocket rocket, honestly. She was an amazing woman. But she would bang tables and say, no, no, no. If the men are getting this, the women must have it. So when I started international games, I was wearing men's kit. You know, I would get what was ever left over in the kit room. So I might have a 44-inch chest tracksuit. I might have a shirt that I had to tuck into my shorts and nearly came out the bottom of my shorts.
But I think that also extends into other places because I've been looking at places like construction, places where they think the men should be working, and women that I know of that have gone into, we're wearing things that are really not designed or even safe for us because they've designed the whole industry around men.
You know, why should I wear shorts with a little net in them to keep one's bits together when I don't have those bits? You know, and I used to cut the net out and then the FA used to tell me off because I used to return the shorts with the net cut out. And I said, but do you know how uncomfortable that is?
Yeah.
You know, so and the one thing that Sonia did with FIFA was got the big boys like Adidas to create women's kits and women's football boots. You know, so this is where the change started. And then at the FA, we had the most magnificent woman called Hope Powell, who for 15 years, she was head of women's football at the FA and changed the face of how it was delivered.
Okay. You've named quite a few different individuals. Is it one specific individual that stands out, that has made a clear mark on your career or your perspective in football?
Both of those women I mentioned. Sonia, she was absolutely magnificent how she changed women refereeing globally. But Hope, she was one that, you know, when I needed somebody to sit down and have a coffee with, I would go along to her office and see if she was around for a coffee. And sometimes we would just leave the building and go and walk around the car park and chat because we both had similar experiences of people not listening because people didn't want to listen. And I worked in a team of 10 managers to start with at the FA, nine men and myself. My line manager was man. Everybody was male.
I sometimes think sometimes the reason some people choose not to listen or don't have to because it doesn't impact them.
No, exactly.
So it's like, okay, really?
Absolutely.
Why am I bothered about she's got something in her shorts that's very uncomfortable for her? Or why do I need to care about she might need a day off because she's a caregiver, often women are, because it doesn't affect me.
No.
And I think that's really, really sad. But I do feel we've got a long way to go. But if men are deciding a lot of decisions, and not just that, they shape the strategy, they shape the culture, it leaves a lot of things to either grow as flowers or weeds within that. Because it sort of says this is what is acceptable within this organisation. So if someone lower down decides that actually we'll call someone out or make a gender biased viewpoint, it's like, well, it's okay because on top this is how they're like anyway. And
I think there's a lot to be said in that. There was a couple of guys in that team that were great friends of mine. They're people I would have taken to war with me because they would always have my back and still are. You know, but I used to go to a team meeting and say about, on the agenda would be the development of women referees, and we'd probably never get to it.
Oh,
And
conveniently.
And I used to say to the guys that I got on really well, and I said, we never seem to get to it. And they said, Janie, it's just, I'm going to be honest with you, it's not high on our agenda because
Not
we
high
don't.
on your agenda.
On their agenda, because they said, we don't feel it because we don't know how difficult it is for you, and there was a lot around at the time that I learned about myself. I couldn't fight every battle, and I was forever challenging stuff. And I realised I'm actually not being heard because I'm challenging too much. So I really learned then how to step back and challenge what was important.
What was important then?
I think the first thing that was important for me was to get a woman's strategy.
Yes.
So I wrote the woman's strategy.
I just love the fact that if it's not happening or it's not there, I'll do it, I'll make it, I'll write it. I love that attitude.
Well, it's the only way I could get anything done. And then my boss wasn't great at accepting any initiative that I took forward. But if it was something like this, and I remember complaining to him one day about there's no real pathway for women, he said, well, write the strategy. I said, okay. So I wrote the strategy knowing that would have to go to the referees committee, knowing it would be really difficult for them to refuse to have a women's strategy because that puts a big cross in the equity box.
Yeah. With FIFA, a lot has happened in terms of controversy and in terms of ED&I. What was a pivotal point for them to change over? Was it like individuals like you coming in to challenge them or help them through the process? Or was it just something that happened around them?
FIFA are a very interesting body.
Yes.
I was actually working as a VVIP on the Women's 2011 World Cup in Germany. A very, very important person, which always makes me laugh.
Is that really there?
It's really what it is.
I love it.
So you have the VIP and then you have the VVIP. So it's hilarious. So it meant that I was a match delegate. So everything about the running of the match was down to me.
Next time I go somewhere, I'm not a VIP, I'm a
VVIP. It's hilarious, honestly. And that meant that the team meeting 1 day or 2 days before the match, the teams would all come in, security would come in, the coaches, everybody that was involved with that team, the doctors, they would bring the kit colours in and I'd have to decide what kit they could wear. Yeah. So there was no clashes. And then I would decide.
Very important now.
Oh, I tell you, it was amazing. And I can remember on that occasion, this was in the November, and I was in the VVIP section and all the FIFA executive committee was coming in there. But of course, and I sort of met them all and I had to schmooze them all a little bit, make sure they were comfortable before the match. And I didn't realise anything at the time. But 2 weeks later, of course, Chuck Blazer blew the whole of FIFA worldwide, just blew it apart because he'd been a whistleblower. So, and I thought, oh my goodness, that was only 2 weeks ago that I was actually with all these guys.
Okay. And you think that was a pivotal point in terms of change in terms of FIFA?
For women, I think it was a pivotal point for the change of FIFA. Yeah. And that ended up with obviously Sepp Blatter going and Platini going. But I think they've still been very slow, they had a woman co-opted member on their executive committee, which was Moya Dodd from Australia, a lawyer, absolute brilliant woman. But it still took a long time after that for there to be a better balance of gender.
In terms of that whistleblowing, for someone that's new to this, could you give us some insight of what exactly happened from the inside of someone that's there?
Yes, so Chuck Blazer, yes. USA representative, yes. And this is all in the public domain, of course. So I was, chatting away happily to Chuck. He's quite an interesting character. And he was already in the process of recording conversations that were happening in FIFA meetings. Yes. And then he handed, as a way of him being exonerated, he became the whistleblower on some of the corrupt deals that FIFA were doing. And he'd got the evidence with the conversations.
If that was a watershed moment, how was the new FIFA like after? Because it's still there.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it changed that much. If
So
I'm
it had a
honest.
bit of a rocking.
It had a rocking, but all the time you've still got people, you know, in the decision-making roles at FIFA who, I need to position this quite well, who perhaps don't always do what is good for the game.
Okay.
Then you're never really going to change that core culture of the organisation. There is more women in there, for sure, but it's still an interesting place to work. They have no one they have to answer to. And all the time you have that, they can do what they
And
like.
that's quite shocking when you think about it. If you're no one refereeing them, no one to answer to, and they set the tone of how things are done. But not just that, to the wider world, when you have women and also men out there that want to get into this industry, you're setting the tone for that legacy as well.
I'm not sure that was even considered. I'm not sure they even really thought about it. I'm not sure they even cared. I don't know. Any one of the above. But to them, they knew that they were marking their own homework. So it didn't matter. Nobody really could tell them what was good and what wasn't good.
Do you think we should have a referee for FIFA?
I think there needs to be some independent somewhere to check and challenge what they do.
How could or would that look like if we did have somebody?
Yeah, and the FA have just brought in a like a committee, I think it is, which is independent and neutral and is check and challenging what council and what the board do. And I think that is a brilliant idea. And they're independent sometimes to football, and certainly all independent from the organisation. And FIFA need to do something similar because they are the world governing body of football in this country. And if you look at the lawmakers, which is IFAB,
Yes.
they're made up nearly all white men. Last year, they put a picture out of the IFAB meeting. There was about 30-something people there. One woman, one Asian, and one person of colour. That was it. They are making the laws of football for the whole world.
And that in itself is concerning because the world doesn't look like that.
Absolutely. And when you consider that IFAB, predominantly 4 votes come from the United Kingdom, England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and 4 votes from the rest of the world. Now, for years, they keep saying, year on year, they need to change this, but they don't. It's still the same.
Why do you think that space looks the way it does?
Because it's a lovely role to have on IFAB. So
Fancy titles and
fancy titles, which is why it's nearly all white men. You know,
I
why
imagine
would
from
they
certain
open the door?
backgrounds and
Yeah, you don't quite fit, and people from other backgrounds don't think they fit because when you see a photo published like they did last year, I'm sure it's slightly different this year because for a start off, Debbie was hit on it now, but when you see the photo that was published, and you know there was this big thing on social media, IFAB have met, and I'm thinking, look what you've just done.
I think also as a woman going into that, or even to say woman, Asian woman like myself, if I was to go into that could be quite intimidating.
For sure.
And I've been in boardrooms where I've gone and think I'm the youngest person in the boardroom, the only person of colour, I'm a woman from a certain background. And that in itself, in a smaller space, is intimidating as it is. And I feel I'm able to hold my ground. But should it be in that kind of space and thinking this is the ultimate body for the world for football, and I'm sitting here, sometimes it worries me some people might be given a seat at the table. I'd be so grateful they're on that table, they forget to speak.
Absolutely. But you see, I think a lot of these organisations, they don't want somebody to speak.
No.
They don't want somebody who has a voice. Yeah. They want people that are just going to nod.
They don't want you and I.
No, they don't want you and I. They want people who are going to nod in agreement, regardless. Yeah. Now, to implement any change, the nodders are not going to do that. Yeah.
You clearly didn't do that in FIFA. From what I've read into in terms of your career in FIFA, there's a lot of highlights. There's also some tension of what happened in terms of your departure. Also in terms of you have shaped ED&I in FIFA. Can you talk about some of the highlights?
In the FA or FIFA?
Both.
Yeah, so I think I didn't have such a big role to play in FIFA because that was shaped by Sonia for sure. But it was even some of the women in that group of 8 back there who saw me as a threat because I was English, the home of football.
Okay.
And that was really difficult to fit in with some of the women then as well. They made my life quite difficult.
It can be hard working with women.
Absolutely. you know, and then I look at the FA. The FA was a challenge constantly. And I remember one of my really good friends said to me at the FA, you know, he said, Janie, you love the job, but you don't like the people very much. And I said, no, I don't like them. I don't like them because they don't share my values. I'm not saying that my values are the right values, but there's a massive clash in how we operate and what we believe in.
Sometimes it's not about agreeing with someone's values and respecting. Like,
Yeah.
we could agree that we have differences, but
Yeah.
we're working together. I respect your views and values, and I hope you respect mine, and we come together. It would be quite sad if we all had the same views, same values, and just have copies of one another. That would just be sad, and it wouldn't be inclusive in the sense that...
No.
We wouldn't get the best out that space. They say, the statistics saying, in terms of actually innovation, in terms of performance of an organisation, where there is diversity and it's fostered on, it's actually implemented and pushed on, you'll be more productive, more innovative by 35%.
Yeah.
And it's sad when you think of certain spaces that are not diverse, they're not inclusive. Even if you don't agree with it, do you not want an organisation that's performing really well and very innovative because of how they perform, because they're diverse? It's as if they're missing out that trick card.
But they don't get it. They just don't get it.
They don't get it or they don't want to get it.
Both. You know, I remember taking initiatives to my boss and him saying, no, that would never work. And I knew full well it would.
Yeah.
And I can remember one particularly around the development of assessors. And I took it to him and he went, no. 6 months later, that initiative came out under his name. Now, I don't mind because I don't care whose name goes on it as long as that initiative worked. But just be honest about
you
it.
got some recognition from me.
Yeah, but just be honest about it. And I remember him saying to me in one of my appraisals, I was great at networking. I love people. I'm fascinated by people from different environments. I want to know more. So I spent a lot of my time, not within my 40 hours at work, but a lot of my time networking and going to events. And at my appraisal, I remember my boss said, you're empire building. And I went, oh, hold on here a minute. Firstly, I'm not empire building. I'm networking.
Yeah.
And as my line manager, you should be using my network.
And encouraging it. If anything...
But he didn't get it.
You were an ambassador.
Absolutely.
But maybe he didn't see that because he might have seen you as a threat.
Anything that raised my profile, I was not allowed to do.
Okay.
Even the BBC were doing this documentary on women in football, and all the big hitters were in it, and they wanted me in it. And in fact, I found the emails a few days ago, and my boss kept saying no. And the BBC kept saying, look, we'll send you the script. We'll send you the video afterwards so you can okay it.
Yeah.
You know, no. And the only thing that could come down to was they wasn't going to do anything that raised my profile.
But maybe that's also down to his stability.
Sure.
Maybe he isn't secure as an individual in his own self, that he's intimidated by this happening. Not actually seeing it as Janie and my team's going to do this. This will raise her profile, our profile. It actually shows the exemplar work we're doing within this organisation.
No, he didn't see that way at all. In fact, he said to me one day, we'd had a glass of wine at a team meeting or two, and you know, he said, you could do my job with your hands tied behind your back, couldn't you?
And he knows that.
And he knew that. And I said, I could. I said, but why would I want your job? Yeah. You're office-based, I'm remote. Why would I want your job?
I don't think you'd want to be fully office-based.
No, I'm a little bit of a free spirit. So I knew then that he found it tough. And one of the other guys in the team, who I got on really well with, former Premier League referee, nice guy, high profile. And he once said to me, after again this proverbial glass of wine, he said, "You intimidate me, Hinny." And I went, "Really? No." I said, "I don't set out to intimidate anybody." I said, "Why do I intimidate you?" He said, "Because you're really good at what you do." And I'm thinking, oh my goodness. And slowly I was building up this, I've got no idea what I'm involved in here, of how people think and how they think of me.
I could tell you, clearly you have some strong qualities. You have some leadership skills. You could see in terms of the distance what's coming. So you're preparing. They may obviously be very vulnerable from their perspective potentially. And you clearly struck a chord in terms of their vulnerability. And it's better to sort of think, get her way, than actually fostering to help the organisation, rather than addressing actually we have certain things within this organisation we need to address, some weaknesses within us men or leadership team. So it's easy for them to say, actually, Janie, go away, we don't want this, we're not ready for it, rather than say, actually, I'm quite vulnerable within my leadership role because of your strong good qualities, which is sad.
It is sad. Both of my good friends from that team who I'm still in contact with today, they both said to me, look, you're 5 years ahead of everybody else. Yeah. And I even found that strange, but I sort of could understand it.
But they could see that you're 5 years ahead.
I didn't see it at the time. I was always just trying to be innovative in how we did things.
And if they were being the tick box kind of organisation, clearly they were in for a shock when you arrived, because you're not a tick box person. So it might be the fact, actually, Janie ticks the box of being a woman referee that works with us, but she talks, she networks, she could talk to people. She's not scared of space. So you taking up space probably is more about their fear from their eyes than anything else, which is quite sad.
And that went against me. Yeah. All of those things went against me, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Because they would like to have just put me in a box.
Yeah. And you weren't going to stay in that box.
And what was it in that film, Dirty Dancing? You never put baby in the corner.
Oh, you don't. But within football, offset, we've spoken before. We met before, we've spoken before about some of the challenges that you've had as a woman referee on the pitch that wouldn't happen for a male referee. Can you talk us through some of them here?
Yeah, and mainly I didn't have problems with players.
Yes.
Mainly. I would get all the comments that I should be barefoot pregnant at the kitchen sink.
Of course.
Sorry, you're in the wrong game. You should be at netball. Shouldn't you be down Tesco's, doing the shopping for your husband? Yeah. All of the usual stuff.
Yeah.
But you learn that is just... It's just...
A reaction.
Yeah, you just ignore it. Yeah. You don't take any of that on board. Even running the line, when I heard them behind me, the spectators saying, oh, she's got no VPL. She's obviously not wearing any knickers. Well, and you're trying to concentrate on your job.
Yeah.
And
which
somebody's
is very
talking about
important
your VPL.
Job. Yeah.
Which, by the way, I wore cycle shorts under my shorts. And then another time I ran down to a corner flag at a Football League game. And one of the spectators was hanging over the hoarding saying, I hope your children die of cancer. And I'm there running to the corner flag. And it threw me for a second, but I knew that my first concentration was on making the decision, corner or goal kick.
Yeah.
And I was flabbergasted, and at half time I went in and the guy who looks after the referee said, everything okay, Janie? I said, well, actually, no. I'm a little bit uncomfortable. And I told him what had happened. He said, can you pick him out? I said, oh, yes. And so I went back out the tunnel with him, pointed to the guy, and they kicked him out. And he was going to be banned for life, which is great that the clubs took such a positive stance. But from actual verbal threats on the football field, you used to get players that used to come nose to nose with you. And I used to take a step back and put my hand up. And as I'm taking a step back, that's saying that's my space. And as I took a step back, I said, okay, I'm taking a step back. You join me, it's a yellow card. Then you can talk to me. And mostly, well, they never, ever stepped towards me then. Mostly they would talk to me. And when one guy started shouting at me, I just walked away and he went, you said I could talk to you, ref. I said, yeah, but you're shouting at me. So I'm not listening.
Yeah.
And so you almost turn into mother mode in many respects, that if you threaten to do something with your child, like if you do that again, you're going to your bedroom.
Yeah.
It's like a player. If you do that again, it's a yellow card or whatever. So there was always things like that. And I always remember this guy, I sent him off, showed him the red card, so he dropped his shorts.
Dropped his shorts?
Yeah, dropped it all completely.
Okay.
And trying to intimidate me.
And would that happen to a male?
No. And I just looked down and went, oh, is that it? But I was going to say that because he was trying so hard to humiliate me that I just flipped it straight away.
Clearly it was done intentionally for a reaction, and also because you're a woman.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it was very rare that I had situations on the field that were challenging, but it was often the dugouts, it was often the directors' boxes, and that, I guess, spectators also, they were the places where most of the abuse came from.
But if you think about it, whatever game that was being played that day, you as an individual had a very big part in terms of controlling the situation. And you can't make everyone happy. It's like being judged for the day.
No.
You can't make everyone happy. If you say off red card and say, no, that shouldn't be a red. If you try to control situation, somebody's not going to be happy.
You're going to upset someone.
And really, it's potentially a case of what can we say to this person? And to say something about your children and cancer.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
this is how
they
low
wanted
we're
to throw me off.
It's a
My
reaction.
concentration.
They
of
wanted
course.
you to sort of, hang on, who's that?
Yeah.
What's going on?
What's my children got to do with the game?
Yeah.
What's it got to do with any decision I made in that game?
But it actually shows how professional you are, that you didn't get intimidated by it. Because that's what they wanted. Probably wanted you to bite, lose track of what's happening. And before you know it, it's no longer about the game. It's about what's been said there. And that's what they wanted. But I'm proud that you didn't respond. But it's sad that you've had to be in these situations in the first place.
You know, Wendy and I have had this conversation many times that our early years in refereeing, she was about 3 years ahead of me. We were probably too tolerant because we just wanted to fit in.
Yeah.
You know, rather than be identified as woman first, referee second, we wanted to be identified as referee first, woman second. Yeah. So we just wanted to fit in, which is why we, in those early days, we didn't challenge. You know, the other thing I think is really important, and it's important for women in general, is a man would turn up to a game in his suit, collar, tie, done. Yeah. What I turned up to a game in was always looked at, scrutinised. So were my trousers too tight? Were the heels of my boots too high? Did I show too much neckline? Yeah. You know, if I had a skirt suit on, is my skirt too short?
But you can't win people.
No.
Because I've had it. More recently, I went to a boardroom and someone said it off the cuff. I don't think they meant it deeply. They turned around and go, "Hush, you're very corporate here." And I go, "What do you mean, very corporate?" And I was like, imagine if I didn't dress the part. They go, "Oh, she doesn't know how to dress for the boardroom."
Absolutely. So you're not going to win. You know, I went into the office one Monday morning and my boss looked down at my shoes. And he said, "Do you wear those shoes to football?" They were little ankle boots, but with a stiletto on. I said, "Well, no, of course not." "Oh, right. Doesn't matter."
And he needed to ask you that.
And I said, "What do you mean it doesn't matter, John? You need to tell me now." And he said, "Well, we've had a written complaint from the club that you refereed on Saturday saying the boots that you wore for your pre-match inspection damaged our field as I walked round."
Damaged their field?
And I said, "Hold on, this is September. The pitches are rock hard. You should be on the beach in a day like this." And I had little 2-inch block heels on my boots that my mum would have been proud of. Yeah. And he went, I said, "Do you know what, John? I must have had a really good game if that's all they could find to complain about."
Yeah. Sidetracking the main issue.
Sure. They had to complain about something.
Which is quite sad. But within that space, not just in football, opening it up now in terms of ED now across the board, there's obviously a wave of change that happened over the years, decades. From what you saw back then to what's happening now, how is EDI now being managed? Is it where it should be?
I actually think we've done a lot of it quite badly.
Okay.
I think people tried, for whatever reason, to get ED&I on the agenda, particularly in business.
Sometimes I think they try too hard just to be seen to be trying.
So we went through, a lot of people saw ED&I as an opportunity for it to be a cash cow. Yeah. Go in there, do some training for that organisation, tick that box. That was wrong. So what's happening is, what people don't go into an organisation now and feel that they belong there because it's not an inclusive environment.
I'm glad you mentioned the word belong, because belonging really is deep down within ED&I. If you don't belong, they can have all the programmes to include you. But if you do not feel part of it, it makes no difference.
That's where they got ED&I wrong. All they talked about, we need all the protected characteristics, we've ticked all those boxes, done. But to actually do the real work, which is where you create that inclusive environment, people feel they belong there. So the money you invest in their development stays within your organisation for 3 or 4 years rather than 1 to 1.5 years, which is what the statistics are showing. So that's where we got ED&I very wrong. So when people have said to me recently, you know, big companies, sometimes, you know, it's a fallout from what's happening over the pond. They're bidding their ED&I programs. I said, yeah, they are. Good. And they sort of look at me and I said, because now they're concentrating on their people and who really count. And that's the people who work in their companies, in each of the teams. So you're now going to get a place where people are going to start feeling that's where they belong.
How should real ED&I or the belonging side be actually manifested within the organisation? What are the core things that need to be there?
I think there's a few things we need to look at now. Scrub ED&I.
That's it.
Stop it. Just stop talking it DEI, whatever you want to call it. Just stop it. Yeah. But then focus on creating inclusive environments where people feel they belong. Look at intersectionality so that you've got a cross section of people with protected characteristics, which forms your intersectionality. And then look at the intergenerational working. You could have up to 5 generations working in any one working environment, all with different values, all with different behaviours. How are we going to get a baby boomer to work with a Gen Z? You know, these are the things you need to understand now for your organisation to be successful.
Is that easy to implement, though? Because really, that sounds like a lot of work.
It's no more work than the companies employing ED&I specialists to tick boxes, because that's a short-term fix.
Sometimes when I see some of the programmes, or what comes out of the rollout of the programmes, I look at, okay, diversity, we're going to make a diverse group, right? And it's as if, okay, equality, this is how we're ticking these things off. And it's as if it's quite robotic, which is sad, because I'm thinking that's not the intention, is to feel belonged, feel like you have a voice, and it comes with culture. Big thing is around culture, because you could have all the programs you want, but deep down when you come out the door, the culture isn't there to support it. It's really a silo that works over there to tick boxes. And I've seen it when people have been welcomed into certain rooms, and I've looked thinking, I feel uncomfortable for that person. I feel uncomfortable for other people here because a person's scared to speak. They're there for a certain tick box mechanism. And I think that should not be the case. We should be bringing the right people in, giving them that space, supporting that transition. And where there are gaps, reality is sometimes if you've never been in a boardroom before, I'd never at one point been in a boardroom. I didn't know what a non-executive director did. For that person, they're new to it. They might just need a sort of heads up or sort of, but once they've got that done, they can actually find their own space. But if we don't really get into depth of it, and we're just like, get the person in, and now they sink or swim, or we've ticked a characteristic, that's okay, we're inclusive here, which is sad, because I'm thinking, if they're not talking in the boardroom or in another space, you haven't ticked it off properly.
And you've got to give them the confidence and the courage to be themselves. And they've been employed to do a job because they're good enough to do that job. Yeah. So let them contribute. Yeah. So I think this is the part of the training that organisations need now. And I'm really pleased that ED&I, D&I and everything else has been dumped, because it's not how it should be. Yeah. And I'd much rather look at making sure people feel they belong in environments. They work in environments.
Okay, how do you see that space looking in 5 to 10 years' time, if it's implemented correctly?
Yeah, I'm hopeful for the future.
Okay.
I'm hopeful for that space, because I think you needed to almost dump all of the superficial stuff to be able to concentrate on what really matters. Yeah. And I think that's really important. And then we need to make sure we build a culture where people feel confident and they have the courage to actually be who they need to be within that environment.
Okay. With that in mind, now going back into sports, talking about now women in sports, I want to touch on sponsorship and how women's sports looked at differently as opposed to male sports. So we've recently had the Lionesses win the Euros.
Whoa!
Yes, and I think, again, that's another mark in the sand. But at the same time, when you look at the sponsorship deals, when you see the tension, as if like they get the tension when they win, everything else put aside. But what you see in terms of how players are paid, sponsorship deal opportunities quite different for women's sports. Example here, obviously, with the Lionesses win the Euros, as opposed to the men football side. Why do you think that is the case in terms of sponsorship and pay?
So I'm asked constantly, should women be paid the same as men in football? And at the moment, I mean, I'd love that to be the case, but at the moment, let's be realistic. It can't happen when the men's game brings in the sort of financial support and revenue that it does.
Yeah. But the women are doing really well.
So, the first season after the last Euros win, the gate receipts on the WSL went up by 65%.
Fantastic.
Last year, they went up 38%, so they're still on the rise. They are selling out the big stadiums on a regular basis. They reckon by 2027, they'll bring in an extra revenue of 100 million a year.
Yeah.
Now, already, my question is, where is the revenue going?
Yes.
I'd like that answered, particularly as if you look at the World Cup, for example, FIFA brought in an extra 571 million in extra revenue for the Women's World Cup.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need to see that being reinvested. But if we come back domestically, around 15 years ago, we were working really hard to get the Premier League clubs to actually adopt a woman's arm, because that's the only way we felt women's football could grow. And it was the right thing at the time. Now we're seeing that we actually don't need that because it's suffocating the women's game. So for the last few years, I've been very vocal that women can't arrange their own sponsorship packages without agreement with the main club. Okay. And some of the sponsors would clash with the main club sponsors. Some of the main club sponsors then don't want some of the sponsors that the women comes up with. So it actually does hold the women's game back. And I see two clubs this year, it's definitely Everton, I want to say it's Villa, have now broken away from the main club. So they have to be self-supporting, which is great because we needed them to get professional over the last 15 years, particularly in their administration. And now they've got a real opportunity to not being a tagged on part of any sponsorship deal, but to actually start to negotiate their own.
That's really pleasing from my perspective to see, because I think sometimes when you see them do really well, I'm thinking, you know, in the background, they're not getting paid as much as the men, but they're actually performing really well. And they're delivering, and also they actually genuinely seem quite happy doing. Because sometimes I see some of the men's games, they seem quite angry if they just don't win. And with the women, I've seen it as they see it as we've gone out, whether win or lose, we're a team, we come back.
And what do you know? They've showed they do things differently.
Yeah.
They really have. You know, when you saw Serena Wiegmann, you know, singing on stage in front of Buckingham Palace, you would never have seen Gareth Southgate or others in the man's game doing that. You know, but she's got something to sing about.
Yeah. Do you think there's space about mixing gender on a team?
No.
Or is it just...
I don't agree with it at all. I think the FA have this right that you can have mixed gender up to under 13. So when puberty kicks in, the strength of the boys versus the girls is huge. I do think maybe there's some sort of trial in the future that if you've got pretty strong women that physically could hold their own with males, then perhaps try it.
It's a bit like
generally it's not the same.
When there's been conversation with boxing, and I'm like, okay, when you have to sort of look at the physical side of the people, and obviously how you're saying maybe mix if the physique.
It's a physicality more than anything else, and only the sports scientists can measure that. You know, but you look at, and I say this often, that the man's and the woman's game of football is completely different. We need to stop comparing them. They are different games. The man is about strength, stamina, power. The woman has always been more technical, so it's far more ball to feet, although they play some great balls now. But it's a different game. So we need to keep that where it is. And the women are not ever going to be as strong as the men because their physicality doesn't allow that.
Given that there is obviously medical and natural reasons why, in terms of strength, power, it makes sense in that kind of sense, but we'll see what happens in terms of that. We're coming towards the latter part of the podcast. There's a couple of things I want to round up. So obviously in the recent years, you obviously were awarded with your OBE, so congratulations. And that clearly is a recognition for what you have contributed to sports and in terms of equality, in terms of women equality and recognition. How did it feel receiving your OBE? I've seen photos.
Oh my goodness. So I'd been on a trip to Paraguay working for World Athletics on the Women's Gender Leadership Programme. So I was delivering training for a whole week to all the women across South America. And it had been a particularly long journey, a long week, fabulous week. I was absolutely exhausted when I stepped into my kitchen with all my bags and baggage. I saw the post on the side, and there was one envelope that looked a little bit different, and it said, personal and confidential, the Cabinet Office on Her Majesty's service. And I think that's a little bit different. That looks far more than a speeding ticket, so which I collect. So I opened it, I read 3 lines and just cried.
Oh.
I cried my eyes out. And then, Hirsch, I continued to read, and it then said I wasn't allowed to tell anybody. So it was embargoed for 6 weeks. And I was sat there blubbing like a baby, and I couldn't tell anybody.
Did you not tell anyone at all?
The only person I could tell, if you have somebody in your organisation that is in charge of your social media and marketing, you can tell them.
Okay, is that to prepare?
To prepare the statements and things. And that was my daughter, because she was my business manager. So I told her, and she was the only person. And we had a secret code. So I don't know whether you follow Star Wars with
It's not so much.
Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yes.
OB is OBE.
Yeah.
So she used to call me Kenobi. And none of the family knew what she was saying, but she would call me Kenobi. And that was our secret language. And then it was embargoed till the 29th of December. And on the 25th of December, I went and had lunch, a Christmas dinner with my sister, brother, father, and I told them. So I was 4 days before the embargo, which I might get a knuckle wrap for it, but I doubt it. I wanted to tell my father face to face.
He must have been very, very
He cried.
proud.
He
Because if
cried
you
and
think
cried.
about it, parents go
Yeah.
through that journey with
Yeah.
you.
I would love my mother to have been there. But sadly, we'd lost Mum, who was the pivotal role of our family. But all my dad kept saying was, so well deserved, so proud of you. And he just cried through the rest of the dinner.
Oh.
So
I think naturally that also is a testament to your character, your contribution, your perseverance to get recognised at very senior levels. So screw what other people might have thought in the early days. You still carried on. So well done and congratulations
thank
for that.
you. I absolutely am so proud.
I've got some quick 5 questions right now. So right now you're not a referee. What do you do with your time? Because you are a very busy lady.
I run a company, Team U Development, which is a social enterprise. So for many years, I've worked on projects which really support young people or women.
Yes.
And it's around leadership and development. So I work a lot internationally still, and I've got some trips to Barbados and Japan and a few others this year. So it's great. It's really challenging. And I also do lots of keynote speaking, lots of leadership workshops and webinars. And I also work on Erasmus programs, which is all about the development of young people and women.
So you've got itchy feet and hands. You're everywhere.
Yeah, it's funny because I came back from Spain last week, and the next day I had to go and renew my passport because I've run out of pages.
I think that says enough.
It's a bit nuts. I felt as if I'd been cheated out of some of my passport because it still had 4 years to run.
It doesn't look like you're slowing down anytime soon. Okay, next question. Where are you heading to next?
Today?
Abroad?
Yeah, so yeah, the end of the month I go to Barbados working for a charity, the Soul Foundation. And that is very much football based.
Yes.
So we do lots of referee training and development, but also use those skills that I learnt on the field, because I do a big thing with corporate organisations around pitch to boardroom.
Okay.
So the skills I learn on the pitch and how I transfer those to the boardroom and into the corporate world.
How is that manifested?
So with the children, we don't actually do pitch to boardroom, but we do pitch to their professional lives. So we've got 14 to 16-year-olds and we'll talk to them we'll do lots of refereeing skills, lots of decision making on the field, put them into small-sided games, make them referee. They look scared stiff like a rabbit in headlights. And then they grow to love it. But then we debrief and say, well, what skills have you demonstrated? Your communication, your decision making, how you manage yourself and all of these things. And then we run a girls' leadership program.
How did that come about to the beginning? Or is it just naturally just grew?
Yeah, so it started in 2013 when I started working for this foundation. And then I went to Barbados 2019, 2021, working closely with the government on girls and women's leadership linked to football.
Oh, okay.
And we're hoping, we've got a proposal that goes in front of the government of St Vincent's and the Grenadines in September, which is all around linking girls and women's leadership to athletics as a sport to start with.
Okay, so you've still kept close to what you're passionate about, even though you might not be refereeing right now. Okay. If you didn't go into sports in any form, what would you be doing today?
I have no idea. For me, it's not even a thing to think about, you know? I look back a lot and reflect on my journey has always been around sport. It's kept me fit and healthy. I've ran all my life. I've been a mother of 2 children and now a grandma.
Sounds like you'd be lost without sports.
Yeah, and I try and instill this into the children as well. I certainly did with both of my children, because for their 30th birthdays, both of them wanted to run a marathon with me.
Wow. Did they?
Yes.
Okay.
My son and I did the London for his 30th. Yeah. And then my daughter, without telling us...
What a birthday.
I know. My daughter booked myself, her brother and her into the Bournemouth Marathon without telling us.
But I guess if you're fit and healthy and regularly training, they're sort of getting there as it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question. What's your favourite food?
Oh, you know what? It's got to be pizza and ice cream, just not on the same plate.
Okay. You can have them.
It's messy.
Name me 3 famous people that you've worked with.
Okay. Lord Sebastian Coe. I work a lot with Seb. Famous people.
It could be through the years, decades.
Heather Small.
Okay.
In Barbados.
Yeah.
Goodness, I don't know. Loads of footballers. Who would I want to mention? I'm going to say Hope Powell because she's inspirational.
What do you want to be remembered for?
I want to be remembered for making a difference. It sounds really cheesy, but I think if we all made a difference, you know, while we're on this planet, the world would be a better place. But from my point of view, I've had opportunity to make a difference, certainly a difference to the lives of equality and for women. And that's what I want to be remembered for.
Seems like you're still going with it.
Absolutely.
I'm really grateful that you are working within that space, because we need strong women to be out there, vibrant, speaking the language that we understand and championing that. As we close this section, I've got a question from the previous guest. It's a bit of a mouthful, so I will go through it here. So the question is, given the recent Euro Championship win by the England women's team, do you think this will help to address the issues around equality? We've touched on that already. And dare I say it, join in terms of FIFA joining the modern era, adapting with video assistant refereeing to reduce the increased unprofessional behaviour on the pitch. That is a mouthful.
I know. So there's a few things in there. I think it's going to start, certainly, starting the process of changing the FA.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be the first thing. I think VAR needs to be used widely, certainly on the women's game. And I think the women's behaviour on the pitch is actually quite good. Will it start addressing the behaviour of men on the pitch? I don't know. I did notice a few examples on the last Euros tournament when women go to ground, they're hurt.
Yeah.
And I saw a few of them, and one particularly, I think she was, I want to say Spanish. She went down, she was clearly hurting, and you know if they roll around, they're not hurt.
Yeah.
You know, but she literally stayed in the one position, and I thought, oh, hold on here a minute.
It isn't
And she got up, and she started limping around. The physio was actually telling her to get back down because she was trying to proceed when actually she was hurt. So I think women, in the women's game, we still don't feign injury. I think it might come eventually, sadly, because I think it might come into the game. My biggest thing really in change is about the women need to be paid more. We touched on it earlier, but you know, the women need to be paid a full-time salary, a decent salary. Some of them are earning now $400,000 and $500,000 a year, but that's on sponsorship.
Yeah.
When you think their win bonus was $75,000 each.
75,000.
Yeah. Now, can you imagine the men getting a win bonus of 75,000?
So some of the men are on more than that a week.
Oh, absolutely. I think their win bonus was about 1.2 million, but they didn't win. Sorry, did I really say that? So we need to start paying the women enough that they can earn a good salary for what they do. I get we can't have parity yet. I get that, but we should be working towards it.
Okay. Fantastic. So, Janie, in terms of yourself, I'm very aware that you have a book coming out. Could you give us some more insight of what to expect about the book? When is it out?
When is a really good question. But so several years ago, I was, asked by several people, particularly in Women in Football, to write a book. And I was very reluctant.
Because you might tell a lot of truths.
Well, exactly. So eventually a really good friend of mine, Shelley Alexander, who used to be head of equality at the BBC, she convinced me that just write it. You don't have to do anything with it. But at least let's write it. She's obviously a journalist and she's helped me on the journey. So I decided this would be a good idea. And I thought, that's it. I'm going to name and shame and everybody who's done me wrong. And I thought, no, that's not the way to go with this.
You should run with it.
I know. So I decided I would tell the stories and then explain how I dealt with it, the tools I used and what I could have done differently or better.
So a bit more of an action.
Absolutely. A dip in, dip out book is how I decided it was going to be. And I've written 61,000 words so far, so I've got 20,000
like
to go.
Thesis.
Oh my goodness.
You do know a PhD thesis is 80,000 words.
I'm nearly there. and so I need to get to about 80,000.
Okay.
And the book is going to be called Performing at the Edge.
Oh, very, very fitting.
Because I believe the moment I stepped into football, I performed at the edge of my comfort zone.
So if you're performing at the edge, what can we expect from performing at the edge? What are the snippets that you could give us a flavour of?
Yeah, I think one of the big lessons to come out of it is performing at the edge is where you grow and develop. And to start with, it's very scary. Yeah. And that could be brought about by change in the organisation, or it could be because you're trying something new.
Yeah.
But that's so uncomfortable at that time. But you learn how to be comfortably uncomfortable. Yeah. And that's really healthy because then you switch it from being a fear to, I'm really excited about this.
It's like having a growth mindset.
It is totally a growth mindset. And I am happy that I've performed for decades now in my growth area, which is the edge of my comfort zone. I don't know that I'd want to be anywhere else.
But taking what you've said in terms of the kind of milestones and also working at the edge of things, that comes with a lot of growth, not just within professional football. A lot of people potentially take a lot out of that book in business, women in different industries, even men, in terms of just performing to the best of their ability and also working outside your comfort zone and come to the end of it. Because there are some people are so scared as if they think, this is my comfort zone. I have a sister that she lives within her comfort zone. But there you sort of have your inner struggles because you're never really pushing yourself out. And you're capable potentially of a lot. If somebody is working within the comfort zone, what can someone take out of the actual book for them?
How it's okay to be in your comfort zone. It's absolutely okay. Yeah. But what do you want from your life? Where are your goals? Where is your evolution? Yeah. Now, if you want to get the next promotion or if you want to go for a higher level job, you are going to have to step out of that comfort zone at some point. Or you're going to stay with the same organisation for 20, 30 years, which is also fine. Mm. It's about your own goals and what you want to do with your own life. I never saw this. If somebody told me 30 years ago, this is how I would spend the 30 years of my life, I would have thought they were nuts.
But what you're actually saying is not actually, this is what you can do. This is what I've actually done by working on the edge, coming out my comfort zone. This is what you're capable of if you want it. That if you want it, there's so much out there. And I think that's a nice thing to show the younger generation, also women and other people, that actually it's scary. Get comfortable with the uncomfortable. Absolutely. But there is rainbow, maybe not a potential perfect scene, but there's growth, there's opportunities. Some people say, oh, well, Hush, you have options. I'm working outside my comfort zone every day.
Absolutely. And actually, people often talk about seizing opportunities. Fabulous. But actually, you have to create some of those opportunities as well.
Yeah.
They're not just to come in front of you for just to have a look and say, yeah, no, maybe.
I think you have to just be brave in that, and through your own experience, you have been very brave. You've taken not the most pleasant situation at times, used it the best that you could, worked on outside your comfort zone, and that's a testament to who you are, but also exemplar to other people coming through. So I'm very much looking forward to that book slowly coming out. Keep me posted. I would very much look forward to reading that book. I'm sure there's going to be other little headliners that we could look forward to as well.
Just a few.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.